chunks of ice flowing through my veins, and so I turn away from him quickly. I pull sleeping robes off my shoulders and let it drop to the floor before I quickly put on my new robes over my head. I can feel his eyes boring into my back, and I try to ignore it, even though it fills me with so much humiliation. I want to ground up. I want the ground to open up and swallow me whole. I lace up the front of my dress as best I can with my shaky fingers and shaking fingers. What am I doing? Turning back to face him before I eventually get myself sorted out. Good, he says quietly before coming any closer. He'll be wanting to keep me at a safe distance, I suppose. Now listen carefully. The Dark Lord wants to see you. I go cold. Is it about Olaf? I breathe the words out, barely able to speak for terror. His mouth twists. I don't know, he says quietly, his eyes dark with fear. He seems convinced by my story about why Antonin went missing when I spoke to him about it, especially considering that I had Bellatrix to back me up. But he arrived here with Bellatrix a moment ago and told me that he wants to dine with you this evening. He said that he would give you half an hour to make yourself presentable. He didn't tell me why he wants to eat with you. I did not press him on the matter. I have no intention to court disaster. I start to shake. Eat with Voldemort? I'd rather eat glass than eat with him, I say without really thinking about my words. His mouth curls up into an involuntary smile. Indeed, but I'm afraid you have little choice in the matter. His face is suddenly grave again. You will need to tell him nothing, do you understand? He will not be able to see what happened through legitimacy. I saw to that when I removed the memory for you. Therefore, if Antoine's disappearance is his reason for wanting to see you, it is entirely to you to ensure that no matter what happens, no matter what he does to you, you do not give him anything away. And try not to make eye contact with him if you can help it. I gulp and nod. What if he uses Veritas Serum to question me? I ask shakily. He smiles patronizingly. I had considered that possibility. Here. He removes a small glass bottle from his robes and hands it to me, still being careful not to come too close. It contains an antidote for the Veritas Serum. Drink it. Without even considering it, I drink the potion immediately, pouring the tasteless liquid down my throat, before handing him back the empty bottle. Silly Sarah. Okay. Trust goes a long way, doesn't it? Once upon a time, you would have died before you accepted anything from him. I push that thought away. And there's just a long silence as the pair of us look at each other. He watches me closely, looking for... I don't know what he's looking for. I don't know what to say. I want to talk to him about what happened to such Olaf after he killed Olaf, but the mere thought of doing that makes my skin crawl. Besides, he obviously doesn't want to talk about it. The last time I mentioned it to him, I don't want to think about it. And so I keep quiet. There's just another secret that I'll keep hidden in the dark recesses of my soul. Will you come with me? I ask quietly. I don't want to go on my own. A muscle goes in his jaw. No, he says coldly. The Dark Lord has specifically ordered that you shall dine with you alone. It would only raise suspicion if I were to request to join the party. My heart thuds against my ribs in fear. He stares at me long and hard, his brow lowered. You have nothing to fear, as long as you keep your wits about you, and keep that mouth of yours shut. He reaches out to me, looking for a moment as if he's going to take my hand, but he moves it up and grips at my arm instead. Now come along. He is waiting for you downstairs, and we cannot afford to try his patience. All too soon we arrived outside the dining room door. Dining room door? God, I cannot read the last word on every sentence. I'm like, it's enough of that. I look up at Lucius. His face is tense, rigid, as if he's staring. As he stares down at me. God, I wish he could come with me. What happens if Voldemort finds out what I've done? What we've done. Excuse me. What we've done. Remember what I said, Lucius says quietly before he knocks smartly on the door in front of him. Come. A cold, high, awful, familiar voice calls. Lucius pushes the door open, and I feel the slight pressure of his hand under my elbow, pushing me into the room. The table in the middle of the room is empty, apart from the pensive resting at the end of it. Sitting in a huge, carved chair right next to the table is a tall figure, swathed in a black cloak, his face covered by his dark hood. Fingers brush against mine ever so lightly, just for a second. I look up to see Lucius staring straight ahead, his face pale. Bring her here. The cold voice makes me jump out of my skin. Lucius' hand rests on the Luce's hand rests on the small of my back and pushes me forward, further into the room until I reach the table. A pale, spidery hand emerges from the cloak, making an imperious waving gesture. Leave us. Lucius nods curtly and turns, leaving the room without looking at me once. The door bangs behind me. This huge, cavernous room suddenly feels cold and vast. The spidery hand reaches up and lowers the hood of his robes, and I force myself not to react as I see Voldemort's face, his lipless mouth drawn back into a horrible grin. Well, good evening, Miss Granger, he says in that horrible, cold rasp. How are we doing today? Right. Okay, there's potentially nothing harmful from answering that. Fine, I say stiffly. He smiles all the wider. I'm pleased to hear that. Oh, but you must excuse my manners. He gestures to a small wooden chair across the table from him. Please, sit. I take a deep breath as I step forwards. I can't give him an excuse to hurt me in any way. I need all my strength and all my concentration to face him. I sit down opposite him, clasping my hands together firmly in my lap and looking down at them resolutely. Would you care for something to eat? I chance to look up to find the table suddenly full of food. I look at him. He's smiling at me, watching me expectantly. I start to eat. Excuse me, I just read ahead a little bit. I have no soul. Excuse me. Okay. I know that any hint of hesitation will tell me that I'm afraid of Veritaserum, and I need him to think that I've got nothing to fear in that respect. I pile my plate with food, and my fork rises and falls rapidly in my shaking hands. I tear the food, rip it, gulp it down with nerves. I wash it all down with what looks like water, smells like water, but I'm almost certain contains Veritaserum. But it's okay. I trust Lucius. Not that I trust him to help me, of course. But he's not going to let Voldemort know that what he's done at Dolohov, is he? No. I don't trust him. Voldemort watches me shovel food down my throat, barely chewing in my haste to act as if I am I am not afraid of anything. I have nothing to be afraid of. I have done nothing, and I have nothing to hide. Nothing to fear. That will do. I stop immediately, slowly lowering my knife and fork. I look up at him, trying to keep my gaze level. He smiles. Better. I've got to answer him, because he's expecting me to. If he thinks I've taken Vera to serum. Yes, I say quietly, levelly. He nods at me. Good. He continues to stare at me. I try to stop myself from shaking. I can't let him know that I'm afraid. I'm not going to deny, Miss Granger. I did have an ulterior motive in inviting you to dine with me this evening. Does he expect me to answer? I guess that, I say, just to be safe. He smiles. You're very forthright, Hermione. God, I hate him saying my name. I like that. It means we can work together. I nod. I don't dare do anything else. He looks at me, his red whites, his red eyes narrowed as they study me, but I can't feel him using legitimacy on me yet. You flinched. He says quietly. Why did you flinch when I called you Hermione? I take a deep breath. He wanted an answer to that, I'm sure. No one really calls me that anymore. I say levelly, truthfully. It's always my blood, Muggle, something like that. But never Hermione. His eyebrows, or his lack of them, rise in surprise. So no one calls you by your name? He says quietly. Not even Lucius. My heart stops and then starts again. I look into his red eyes, and I blink, just to be on the safe side. No. Never. His face fades a little. His smile fades a little. I start to shake again. I try to force my body to remain still. Do you want to know why I have brought you here? He asks. Okay. Think, what answer would I give if I had taken Vera to serum? Only if you're not gonna hurt me, I whisper. He laughs coldly. Oh no. I have no intention of hurting you. He says quietly. He points his wand at the other end of the table, and a pensive comes flying towards us, landing neatly on the table. Would you care to look into the pensive? He asks. What will I see? I ask hesitantly. He smiles that horrible, lipless smile. Place your hand, and you shall discover the answer to your question. His smile falls away. I shall wait here for your return. I lean forward, still looking up at him, and I know that I have no choice. Those horrible, merciless red eyes tell me that. I lean further forward and hesitantly place my fingertips into the mist. An invisible hook pulls me forward as I fall into the silver fog. I feel contaminated somehow, as if I float through Voldemort's memories. Allah! Allah only knows. No, she doesn't say Allah. Where's the Muslims in this bitch? There's no Muslims. I'm gonna cut that out. That is like so random. So random! No, don't cut things out. Silly goose. Okay, I'm like, I'm gonna cut this. I've never cut anything I've ever said out of this. Like, even if I'm like, I'm gonna cut this. No, I'm not. I've never done it. God only knows what he's seen in his lifetime. I shouldn't be here. I really shouldn't be here. I eventually ran